Hi, I'm Dominic Alexander, and I'm an Orthodox Christian.
اليوم يوم القيامة فلنتلألأ أيها الشعوب لأن الفصح هو فصح الرب وذلك لأن المسيح إلهنا قد أجازنا من الموت إلى الحياة ومن الأرض إلى السماء.
Yeah, so before I was Orthodox, I grew up evangelical, but even a little bit before that, my family was irreligious. My mom was raised culturally Catholic, so was my father too, but by the time I was born, they didn't really practice it. A little couple years after I was born, my mother was remarried to my stepdad, and they became evangelical a little afterwards. And so I grew up evangelical for most of my young life. I grew up in different churches, so I know the evangelical world pretty well. I know what different church cultures they are. I've been to mega churches and I've been part of smaller churches too. For a good chunk of my experience too, I identified and associated with Calvinism a lot. Close friends of mine were Calvinists for a very long period of my life. And being part of different churches, like I said, I've been exposed to a lot of American Christianity, modern Christianity. I was pretty committed and devout. I know a lot of friends of mine had fell out of the faith, or fell out of Christianity in general by the time we were in college. But I always sought after God. I always wanted to know Him deeper. But growing up, and by the time I had been in college, I did know there was something missing. And later on, after a couple years of looking for what I was missing, I eventually found Orthodoxy. So I think my second year of college, so I had like a stage of depression, and I think a lot of it I was becoming disillusioned with the world in general, whether that be like the education system or relationships in my life or some other things, and in those difficulties, I was finding the Christianity that I had grown up with was just coming short. I don't think I really understood, one, how to suffer well as a Christian, and two, to really have that comfort. Besides, Christ gives us salvation and, we get to be in heaven with Him in eternity. It seemed that was distant, from the reality that I was having to face, at the moment in time. And, I didn't really feel that change that, the scriptures talk about, living a Christian life. I was having a difficulty seeing that in my life and in other people's lives. And the more I struggled with those things, and also going from church to church, it seemed like Christianity was on people's own terms. Their picture of God or their picture of Jesus kind of just depended on, what their flavor was. And I started to find out that really, even the theology at the time that I held on to either wasn't sufficient or wasn't true. It didn't really, who I thought God was didn't really add up to the reality that I was facing. So there was just something that I knew was missing. And like I said, and by the time too that COVID had come and these churches were shutting down, again, that was like another thing of disillusionment that I had to face. And so like in that time of, the COVID lockdowns, I started going to rabbit holes more about church history, about, where do I stand as a Christian? Like I said, is there something that I'm missing? And for a good chunk of it, mostly through the internet, is where I found Orthodoxy. So yeah, I know for a lot of people, including myself, we found Orthodoxy through the internet. and I'm 25, so everyone around my age and younger, not just with with religion, but anything, that's how they identify with things and associate with things, is mostly through the internet. Just because I think that the general culture and what we grew up with just isn't enough for a lot of people, and especially for a lot of young men. Obviously, the modern American Christianity isn't really sufficient, and so a lot of them have found orthodoxy through the internet over the last couple years. And like for me, I didn't even really know what orthodoxy was. There was just interesting topics or points, about orthodoxy that, engaged my interest at first. And, like I said, it began with rabbit holes of just learning more about the Trinity, or learning about maybe in ecumenical councils, or learning about like certain, figures in history. And yeah, it was an intellectual process for maybe like a good 2 years. I definitely learned a lot. And, things about the church started to make more sense the more I started listening to different people on the internet. But really, I mean, orthodoxy didn't really take root in me until I started visiting a local parish.
Think of something that you remember where you were like, wait a second, this is a game changer.
Yeah. No, I definitely think of one thing. I remember I was listening to something about the saints, and the person who was explaining the saints to me at the time, I don't really remember what he specifically said, but I'm paraphrasing. I'm going off memory. But basically, since the saints are in Christ, they're outside of time. They're outside of our time, and so they can hear us. They can see us. They can make intercessions for us. And in the same way that we would ask people in this physical life to pray for us, the saints do the same for us in heaven. And I this is like 2 years ago, and I remember hearing that, and I actually just, I don't know, like a light went on. That I think I'm beginning to understand, not just like the stuff that might be easy to intellectually grasp in orthodoxy, but the mystical part of the church, and that was just like a one step closer to actually like seeing what orthodoxy actually is. And I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she's like, you don't really think the saints actually intercede for us? And I was like, I think they actually do. And I even like showed her like, hey, like the book of Hebrews like kind of shows this, and the book of Revelation shows this. So I just remember like these things about orthodoxy just started clicking, and it got me more curious, to actually start attending an Orthodox parish. Yeah, one of the things missing in modern Christianity is that there's not really like a foundation, like the purpose as to why we worship, and I feel like most people, I don't know, I can't judge people, but a lot of people I feel go to churches, go to evangelical churches or these modern churches is because people like the pastor, people like these personalities that run the church. And the sermons and the talks given are very on a superficial basis. They're not. It's more like advice that you can choose to take or not, rather than like, I don't know, what the apostles and what the saints preach, about this life, about Christ, that I got to experience, going into an Orthodox church. Another thing too, I mean, as we're on this topic of foundation, I mean, a lot of these churches are only found within like the last century. I mean, they don't really have a history, and in my experience, I mean, most people just leave the church just out of preference, not because of anything deep per se, Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my experience, searching churches mine was pretty easy because the first church I visited was the one I stuck with. I remember I was driving with a friend of mine down Linda Vista Road, and that's a road I always, at the time, or I still do now, travel up and down. And I remember seeing a sign on the road that said Saint Anthony Antiochian Orthodox Church, and I was like, is that really real? Because at the time too, I was talking with a buddy of mine online about looking for churches, and he was going to an Antiochian church in the Midwest, and so he said, if you do happen to find an Antiochian church where you live, then you should go there. And this is maybe like when I saw that sign, it was probably like 2 or 3 days after that conversation, and I mean after that, maybe like getting out of the car from whatever I was doing, I just looked up St. Anthony's, and probably a couple weeks after I visited it, and this was like 2 years ago, May 2 years ago. So
Excellent. Dom, what was one of the biggest hurdles for you coming to Orthodoxy?
And things apart, like things about the church, I didn't really have a difficulty. Things like a lot of things about the church, I didn't really have a difficult time grasping, especially by the time I started going to liturgy. The first couple times. To me, I think everything for the most part about Orthodoxy made sense. It was coherent. It was consistent. It just made sense. I knew, just from reading it, this is a church. This is what I'm looking for. And visiting St. Anthony's for the first time confirmed that, because going into the liturgy, it's like, yeah, you're transported into heaven, and this is home. And I think a difficulty for me was really having to admit to other people, the people in my life that I wanted to go into Orthodoxy, because most of my friends were evangelical Protestants, and for the most part, I don't think any of them had heard about Orthodoxy. I hadn't really shared with a lot of people about the Orthodox Church.
What made you think, oh, this is different, this is built different?
Yeah, I mean, attending a liturgy for the first time, I mean, there's definitely the part where it's foreign or exotic, because there's just, I don't know, it's you hear, Byzantine music and all these other things. I'm used to it now, but for someone who's never visited an Orthodox parish, I mean, it's pretty foreign. But, looking at the church, hearing the music, looking at the icons, looking how, the priests and the altar servers, do their thing in the altar, it's beautiful. There's not a lot of words to describe it. You just know that when you're in the liturgy, I mean, you're coming into contact with the divine, right? With the transcendent, and it's just it's there if your heart is open to it, and I was open to it the first time, even though I didn't know what to do, I wasn't familiar with some of the with a lot of the words, I didn't know how the liturgy started and ended, so but I knew within my heart that, like I said, that this was home. This is where I needed to be.
In what ways did it feel the most different? What hit you? Was it the sense of sacred? What was it that you were oh man, this is exactly what I was looking for, that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. For me, I think I just had never really seen something as beautiful before. I think it was just the beauty of the church and the liturgy, that it was just something that I haven't really seen in the world, and I think that's what gravitated me towards it. When we talk about really having an encounter with God, having an encounter with the angels and with the saints, I think really liturgy is that really that special time where, like I said, heaven meets earth, and yeah, just how everything in the liturgy, from incense to icons, like our priest tells us all these things engage our senses, and ultimately for for the heart to be engaged. Yeah, so my patron is Saint Alexander Nevsky. So he's a Russian saint. He's from the 12th or 13th century. He was a prince of Novgorod. I hope I pronounced that right, but he was a prince in that city at the time. At the time, the Russian people didn't really have a czar. They kind of like elected princes to kind of rule over their towns and their cities, and so, but he and his family were kind of the one of the most prominent families, at the time, and Alexander and his family oftentimes had to fight with the Teutonic Knights, and from just Western invasions, coming into Russia. And Alexander, he was actually pretty young. I mean, he started serving in the military by the time he was like 18, and he was actually like leading armies, into battle. And he was also just a very devout man, and overall in the faith. That's just how his parents raised him. And pretty soon, by the time I think he was my age, I mean, he was already elected, Grand Prince at the time. And this is around the same time, too, that the Mongols had invaded Russia. And Alexander thought it was best that instead of battling the Mongols, that he would submit to them, in order to preserve the Russian people and to preserve Orthodoxy. And there's an awesome story of him where he had to meet Bantu Khan, and the Khan, wanted him to offer, sacrifices to his idols, and Alexander told him that he's willing to die, he's willing to be thrown into fire for the sake of his faith, and the Khan just like starts laughing, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, "I like you a lot," and he saw that he saw in Alexander that this was a man that he could trust, as a government official of his. So Alexander, served his people well, served his nation well. And for me, at least, why I chose Alexander as a patron is because he's a good example of what a leader and a servant looks like. And you see that in Christ too. He takes full responsibility for his people, but also at the same time, he's willing to do anything for the sake of his people. And he even died while doing administrative business. He got sick on a trip coming back from Mongolia. He actually passed away at like 42. An amazing thing too. He became like a schema monk maybe 2 weeks before he passed away. And it just kind of just shows like, despite his civil responsibilities, ultimately his heart was for Christ. And I think that's what preserved him, through all the circumstances that he had to deal with in his short life. Yeah, since becoming an Orthodox Christian, I visited a couple monasteries nearby where our parish is, and I think it was John Chrysostom, but he said, monasteries are hospitals too, and they're meant to basically refresh us, in our spiritual walk. And I think it was him who said that, we should make the effort to visit monasteries as often as we can. And I think he even said maybe like 3 or 4 times out of the year. And I definitely agree with that. Every time I visit the monastery, I always feel refreshed. And that's even saying like, because most of the times I go to a monastery, like I'm physically working, besides services, but I do come out of it, with more peace and with more clarity, just because being there, you do prioritize things like prayer and attending more services and, having more conversations with people, whether it be with monks or just people you're visiting with about Christ, about the kingdom. Hi, I'm Dominic Alexander. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I currently work as a water treatment operator. Yeah. Yeah, so Orthodoxy has changed my life because it's brought ultimately healing. I think that's something I always empathize with people who come into the church, is that, you know, it's more than just having the right theology. Ultimately, it's about, you know, finding that healing that only Christ can bring. And that's something that I didn't find really in evangelicalism or Protestantism. I mean, yeah, the problems that I faced were addressed, you know, and people had their solutions. But, you know, when you come into the church and you start doing the praxis of the church, especially by the time, you know, you're baptized and you start partaking of the sacraments, like, you begin to actually heal, you know, and especially when you have a spiritual father who cares a lot about you and knows you and helps you, you know, you start to see this progression of becoming that the person God intends you to be, you know. So things from the past, you know, passions you're currently struggling with, you know, those things you start to be taken care of. Yeah, as an evangelical, I didn't have a spiritual father. I didn't really know what that meant until I came into the Orthodox Church, and I didn't really get to experience that until, like, I actually found a spiritual father earlier last year, and really a spiritual father. I mean, he's really like a doctor. I mean, he's there to take care of you, to know you very deeply, and to know, like, what you actually need in order, like I said earlier, for you to be the person that God intends you to be. So he really takes it upon himself to really, you know, do anything to help you, you know, and I definitely found that with my spiritual father.
Awesome.
How has the community at St. Anthony touched you in positive ways? Tell us about your experience of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at St. Anthony's, I think the community there is pretty unique overall. I don't think it's something that most people, even at a lot of Orthodox churches, get to experience, just because people are just very involved with each other and it's very open. You know, and a lot of people say, like, oh, it's just like an extroverted church. You know, people are outgoing, but really, I think there's a lot of us who are just introverts, like myself, you know, but I think we just found an environment where, like I said, everyone's just so open, you know, and everyone's is genuinely cares for one another, and people are actually interested in what, you know, what each of us do, and yeah, and it's, you know, learning each person there, or getting to know each person at the parish, you know, it's good, you know, there's a lot of talented people, there's a lot of helpful people, resourceful people, there's, I mean, my friends are awesome, you know, just to get to hang out with them and talk with them and just do different things, whether it's, you know, sports during the summer or, you know, these recording sessions, you know, in the winter, or, you know, just all these other, you know, activities, but, you know, really getting to know each other and really to help each other in the faith ultimately, you know. And this is something, you know, our priests always emphasize, that, you know, our salvation isn't divorced from other people. I mean, we're all, you know, we all participate, you know, in the body, you know, and we do all have, like, a responsibility to help one another grow. And I definitely see that in my life, you know, my relationship with other people at my parish, and I love them. They're pretty awesome.
That's great.
Dom, talk about what it's been like to write some scripts and to voice act some Lives of the Saints.
Yes.
Yeah, so for Cloud of Witnesses, I've written a number of scripts for them. It's a pretty unique thing for me. I already have a talent to write. This is something I kind of figured out on my own during high school. And it was always an on and off thing for me, even during college. And, you know, ever since Cloud of Witnesses started, you know, going back into that talent, you know, has been helpful for me too, you know, to kind of just, you know, sit down and write something, you know, creative. And it's not that I'm adding or things to the Lives of the Saints, but at least for me, it definitely helps me draw closer to the saints that I am writing about. And, I get to know them on a deeper level than most people do, because I'm trying to present their lives in a way that is approachable and that people can understand. And, just reading, like I said, reading the lives of these saints and writing about them, it's definitely a journey to getting to know them a lot closer. And then by the time too, we begin to record these episodes and, we're voice acting and all these things, you start to really just envelop yourself in the environment that the saint was in. And, it's history, is no longer like a thing in the past. Like, no, you begin to like relive something that actually did happen. And like, you get to experience a little bit of what this saint has gone through for the faith. And I always feel that way, whatever episode of whatever saint that we happen to record. Yeah, so I mean, I had a conversation with a friend of mine earlier today. He's an inquirer into Orthodoxy, and something that stood out in the conversation was talking about humility and really being open to God and trusting Him. And I think for a lot of people, I know for myself, and this is definitely for me in the beginning of inquiring about Orthodoxy, but a lot of people get stuck in their head. They try to like rationalize things, and they try to make sense of the things in the church, and it kind of really prevents them to kind of really experience like the full-on, the fullness of the church. And it's not just like rationalizing, but it's just people holding back, that they think it's not the time, or, I can do this on my own or whatever. But really it's about, like I said, really having an open, soft heart, for God. And even the difficult things about the church that a lot of people come into contact with, like the saints, I mean, they don't really begin to be a reality until, like I said, your heart begins to open and you actually ask for their intercessions, or even like about the liturgy. I mean, you don't really see the liturgy if you're holding back, And so, I would encourage people who are inquiring about Orthodoxy that they would attend a parish, but when they're there, that they actually really begin to practice the things in the church like with an open heart.
Amen, Dom.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Dom, one more time, unless you guys have anything else in particular?
No.
I was saying just one more time, just for the sake of it, just do the same thing. Hi, start with a smile on your face, right in the camera. Hi, I'm Dominic Alexander, and I'm an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dominic Alexander, and I'm an Orthodox Christian.
ومن الأرض إلى السماء نحن المنشدين نشيد النصر والظفر.
In behalf of all and for